Athletes with disabilities. How sports includes people with disabilities. When you think of the word athlete, you probably don't think that this includes athletes with disabilities. The stereotype of an athlete typically includes able-bodied, high-functioning, and fit people. What many people fail to realize is that an athlete is defined as a person who is proficient in sports and other forms of physical exercise. Almost anyone who does some type of physical activity can be considered an athlete. People often assume that people with disabilities are unable to be athletes, but this could not be farther from the truth. There are millions of disabled athletes that can perform just as well as able-bodied athletes. On the right is a collage of Paralympic athletes in the Tokyo Games 2020. Adaptations. These athletes range vastly between sports. Almost every sport has an adapted version for people with disabilities to play. Each of these athletes have learned to adapt their bodies and adjust based on their disability. It's also important to recognize that a disabled athlete can also be identified as a person with an intellectual disability. Common disabilities of these athletes include paralysis, amputation, autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, vision or hearing impairments, and other cognitive/physical disabilities. There are two types of U.S. Olympic sports that involve people with disabilities. The first is the Paralympic Games. These games refer to only physically disabled athletes. In the Winter and Summer Olympics, the games consist of swimming, judo, wheelchair basketball, badminton, cycling, track and field, skiing, snowboarding, equestrian, sitting volleyball, soccer, archery, wheelchair fencing, and much more. And the second type is the Special Olympics. These games are for athletes with intellectual disabilities. In the Winter and Summer Olympics, the games consisted of bowling, basketball, golf, soccer, swimming, roller skating, gymnastics, tennis, powerlifting, badminton, handball, skiing and snowboarding, and also much more. Disabled sports in the media. Media and inspiration porn. In the media, athletes with disabilities are often underrepresented and used as, quote-unquote, inspiration porn, which is defined as the portrayal of people with disabilities as being inspirational to able-bodied people on the basis of their life circumstances. This has been super common, especially regarding disabled athletes. Often these ads are pictures or videos with short inspirational phrases. Here is an example of a social media post that perpetuates this idea. One of them, the short phrase is, "Your excuse is invalid," and the one on the far right says, "The only disability in life is a bad attitude." These are both examples of inspiration porn in social media. Underrepresented. These athletes are often neglected in the media and shown as a precursor to the able-bodied athletes. Not only do these athletes get underrepresented in the media, but they also get paid significantly less for competing compared to able-bodied athletes. This photo from an article talking about how athletes in the Paralympics are finally getting equal pay after decades is above. Inspirational movies and TV shows. Here are just a couple examples. The first is Soul Surfer. This is a movie about an athlete who gets their arm bitten off by a shark and continues to be a surfer afterwards. This is actually a true story. The next is a positive representation of athletes with disabilities, and this is a documentary called Rising Phoenix, and it's about Paralympic athletes. And the one on the right is called Champions, a movie about a troubled college coach who gets sentenced to serve community service as a coach that coaches intellectually disabled basketball team. Do people with disabilities feel accommodated or treated fairly when engaged in sports? Equality. Equality has been a big thing that athletes with disabilities have strived for, and there is still a huge gap between able-bodied athletes and disabled athletes. One positive step in equality for disabled sport is that the Paralympics now have a 400% increase in their pay scale, making them equal to the pay that Olympians get. It's important to note that this change was only made in 2020, and these athletes have been striving for this for a very long time. According to the article, It's So Much Money by Julia Glum, one of these athletes' reactions to the news was, "I can't believe it actually happened." Masters, a skier, cycler, and rower, tells Money, "We put in all the same dedication, the same type of sacrifices." Another quote from this article is, "Despite being the third largest sporting event in the world, the Paralympics have always lagged behind the Olympics. The Olympics started in 1896. The Paralympics launched in 1960. They don't get nearly as much media coverage either. This winter, NBC hosted just 250 hours of the Paralympics compared to the 2,400 hours of the Olympics." Julia Glum. Less opportunities. Oftentimes, athletes with disabilities have way less opportunities to play sports than able-bodied athletes. A big part of this has to do with the lack of facilities and gyms offering leagues for disabled athletes. This is a huge problem when referring to inclusive sports because it prevents many people with disabilities from having the opportunity to work out and play a sport. Without accessibility and variety of inclusive sports, people with disabilities lack opportunities. How the media can do better. First one would be exposure. The media needs to share more light on athletes with disabilities and share them in a positive and responsible way. Currently, athletes with disabilities are severely underrepresented in the media, so if they had more coverage, this would be a big step towards equality. Get rid of inspiration porn. Inspiration porn is super common when it comes to the media's portrayal of disabled athletes. This harmful practice must stop in order for disabled athletes to be seen positively and deserving of all the work that they do. This is, I would say, the most crucial thing that needs to be gone in the media for disabled athletes because it's just super harmful and can cause a lot of just issues in the disability community. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys learned a little bit more about athletes with disabilities, and please advocate for these athletes and do more research. Thank you.